This podcast provides a platform to discuss important questions and complex issues, challenge the status quo, and confront the boundaries of the establishment. I'm retired police chief Daniel Hahn. I went from being arrested at 16 to serving over 34 years in law enforcement. My goal is to keep you informed with news not being reported, voices not being heard, and the untold history of how we got here so that we can create a way forward. All right. Welcome to A Way Forward. My guest today is Bob Balian, or better known as Pastor Bob, who is the founding pastor of Midtown Church. Bob also serves as the chaplain for the greatest NBA franchise, Sacramento Kings. Pastor Bob is a UCLA graduate with a degree in economics and also earned a Master in Arts and Theology from Fuller Theological Seminary. He once graduated from UCLA, returned to Sacramento, and took over the family construction and engineering business. Eventually sold that and ended up planning Bayside Midtown in 2011 with his awesome wife, Letty. And they intentionally planted that in the heart of Sacramento. And in May of 2021, Pastor Bob led his church in a transition out of Bayside to become what is known today as Midtown Covenant Church. So welcome, Pastor Bob.
Thanks for having me. And you said that just the way I paid you to say that. So good job, brother. Checks in the mail.
Then I definitely expect to get my check.
Absolutely.
So maybe I always like people to understand a little bit about where our guests come from. So maybe talk a little bit. I had the pleasure of meeting your mom and dad. You're a hometown Sacramentan, which also means a lot to me. So talk a little bit about growing up and maybe even a little bit about that other high school you attended.
For sure. Yeah, born and raised in Sacramento. Lived 55 of my 59 years in Sacramento. My only time away was my time at UCLA. Went to Kennedy High School. Chief calls Sacramento High headquarters.
That's right.
Every other high school in Sacramento is Branch.
That's
so
right.
I went to Branch Kennedy. But you know what, Chief, for the most part, like I was raised in a really ethnically diverse, culturally diverse neighborhood in South Sacramento. We were way ahead of our time. There were parts of Sacramento,
right,
in schools in Sacramento where it was literally almost equally distributed in terms of Latin Americans, Asian Americans, African Americans, white people, on and on. So my elementary school experience was extremely diverse. You can look at my second grade school class picture right now and you'll see it. My parents were very affirming of all cultures, so I was blessed in that way. And that went all the way through high school and all the way to UCLA. So I feel like, A, Sacramento was ahead of its time in terms of diversity. And B, I feel like people who grew up in our generation were kind of blessed by that.
So what took you to UCLA, I don't know, as opposed to what I affectionately called the Harvard of the West, which would be Sacramento State University. So what took you to UCLA?
That's so funny. The Harvard West, Sac State. So I went to junior college first. Mm-hmm. I went to American River College. I played baseball and basketball my whole life all the way through. And I went to UCLA just because, A, I had some friends that were there, but B, I wanted to experience something different, you know? And because I had some friends who went to UCLA ahead of me, and they kind of, I don't know if the word is recruited me there, but I went there. I also went there to try to walk on. Wasn't successful in basketball, but I love my experience.
You weren't successful at walking on at one of the biggest basketball powerhouses in our country.
That is correct. But
like
it was
that's some sort of shame or something.
It was a great experience though, and there were some great players when I played. And one of my best friends, one of my lifelong friends, is named Pooh Richardson. Yeah. He had a great college career and he had a great NBA career too. So it was a great experience.
Awesome. So at some point you stopped the business world, what you went to college, at least what your degree is in, engineering and construction, and started in being a pastor. What led you to that? That's a pretty significant change.
Yeah, big time. And somebody who has the belief that I have would attribute it to kind of answering the call of God, but definitely was marching forward in my career with the company that my dad and his friend had started. I had kind of been groomed to take it over and took it over. And to be honest with you, Chief Hahn, 4 or 5 years in, while grateful for it, I was completely unfulfilled, totally dissatisfied, and quite frankly, frustrated. Every time the alarm would go off in the morning, I would go, shoot, I can't wait for tomorrow. So I started volunteering at a really small church in Fair Oaks where we lived. And like immediately the pastor there asked me if I wouldn't mind taking over the really small youth group. And I said yes. And so as a bivocational volunteer, unpaid kind of semi-youth pastor, I started running their youth group. And I mean, I fell in love with it like immediately. And eventually I immersed myself so much, even while running the family business, that it was a small church. It was a church of about 200 people. We ended up with a youth group in 3 or 4 years of about 200 kids. So just felt like I wanted to build my life around that, and had to spend a couple of years talking my wife into approving that change. So that took 2 years. It took a couple of years to sell the business also. And then I dove in head first. And actually, one of our mutual friends, Sherwood Carthen, was the one who first brought me into full-time ministry.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about him in a second.
Yep.
And so did you go to the seminary after you did that, or had you already gone?
Once I talked my wife into approving, putting her stamp and seal on the switch in careers and my pastoral call, I went right to seminary. Now, it took me 4.5 years to finish my seminary degree, but I did that while I was in transition.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And you mentioned Pastor Carthon. So this time when you were working with him, I didn't know you then, but I know Pastor Carthon
Absolutely.
well. So talk a little bit about the impact he had on your life.
Oh my gosh.
As everybody that's from Sacramento knows, he's no longer with us.
Absolutely. We all dearly miss him, obviously. Sherwood, I mean, if I can speak candidly, larger than life in every way possible, physically, spiritually, emotionally. He was a civic leader in Sacramento. He didn't shy away from anything. He was really the voice of the voiceless to some degree, or to a large degree. And I think he was a voice of all Sacramentans to some degree. But he might be the best preacher I ever heard. That man would go into any building and absolutely blow the roof to smithereens in any building he was in.
Attest to that.
Yes. And could you also, can I get an amen for this, Chief Hahn? It didn't matter if the congregation was white, black, Asian,
absolutely.
Latin.
Amen.
They all loved it because he was so powerful.
Yeah. So back then it was called Boss, right?
Yes, sir.
Bayside of South Sac.
Yes, sir.
So then you started Bayside of Midtown, and a pretty famous person said back in the day, and it's been repeated numerous times, that Sunday can often be the most segregated day of the week.
Yeah.
But when you started Bayside of Midtown, that is one of the most diverse churches I've ever been into.
Thank you.
Why do you think, even Bayside of Midtown, the first church you planted, was able to attract such a diverse audience? Because I'm sure that comes with challenges that a non-diverse audience or congregation doesn't have to experience. So how is that, how did you accomplish that, if you were? What do you think was the reason for that?
And if we can get specific here, Bayside, obviously not diverse at all.
Right.
So yes, partnering with them was a surprise to many people. And it came with its set of challenges. But I think that's the advantage of planting a church as opposed to taking over an already existing church, is you get to set the culture right off the top. And your core group, your launch team of, we had 65 people. We were all committed to building a completely diverse church that was, as much as humanly possible, made it comfortable for people of all walks of life. Diverse, even, chronologically, diverse socioeconomically, and obviously ethnically and culturally. you set out doing that intentionally from day one. And so some of the leaders need to be diverse. Some of the people who are, volunteers need to be diverse. Even to the point of the videos you show, the people you bring in, it all has to communicate that all of you are welcome here, and this is a home for all of you. And you're right that some people say they want diversity, Chief, and you will notice
It's tough, right?
but they really don't want it. And so when they start getting there on a regular basis, they say, "Wow, this is who I'm worshiping with. This is who I'm fellowshipping with. This is who I'm in a small group in somebody's home with." I can't quite handle that. That happens a lot. Now they don't admit that when they leave, but that's the reason for it many times. And so that's why, I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just going to say right now in the city limits. So I'm not talking about Bridgeway or Bayside, those that are out in Placer County. In the city limits, we're probably the highest attended church in Sacramento. That's nothing to brag about, but the fact that we're incredibly diverse, maybe the most diverse church in the city, that is something to brag about, because again, a lot of people just can't handle that.
And growing, because you recently, in the last year or two, started an Elk Grove
Yes, sir.
Midtown.
Yes, sir.
So you kind of touched on this a little bit. At one point, you were part of the Bayside family, and then you planted Midtown Church and broke away from Bayside.
Yes, sir.
Bayside is a hugely successful church, huge congregation, youth programs, does all sorts of stuff. Why the starting your own and breaking away from the larger like mothership of Bayside?
For sure. Remind me to get back to this because everything really hit the fan right about when COVID and then George Floyd happened. Right. So remind me to get back to that.
Okay.
But I'll just say, for the most part, there's a word now that's being co-opted and everybody's using it. Some people are using it pejoratively and some people are using it positively, but it's Christian nationalism. And it's basically a term for a Christian who is, I'll say, unfortunately, putting nation first, but their primary agenda is ideological, and it's not Christological and theological. And so I would say there's a bunch of people now who will claim the term Christian nationalism proudly, even with the negatives that come with that. And so you kind of know, okay, at that point, some of those people maybe even can fall into the category of white supremacists. But I think some people are in there unintentionally. I think they just think, when they think church, what they're thinking of is what the suburban white American conservative Republican church has stood for throughout the decades. And again, I know you know this better than anyone. What they've stood for many times isn't biblical, nor is it even nice. So I think there's some people, unfortunately, a large swath of people who are falling into that Christian nationalism and not even knowing it. So getting back to Bayside, if I can speak bluntly, there are some churches who are more open with it out in Placer County and the surrounding areas around Sacramento. Bayside doesn't openly promote that, but I think kind of their thought process kind of has fallen into that, unfortunately. So when George Floyd hit, for example, and you were the chief when that happened, as you well know, it just seemed like when George Floyd hit, it was like the tide went out, and everything that was like under the surface of the water all of a sudden became exposed. And it was almost immediately that people's ideological differences became really important to them. And what used to be okay in terms of what I and my co-pastor Ephraim Smith were talking about on the pulpit, nobody minded, because to be honest with you, everybody who went to church out in Placer County wasn't even listening to us. But once George Floyd hit, it was like everybody's ears perked up. And the congregation at Bayside Granite Bay started listening to Ephraim and I say what we had been saying for a decade. But post George Floyd, Now all of a sudden they had a problem with it. And once the congregation started, it was a snowball effect. Once one person was talking to another person, they ended up putting pressure on the pastors there. And eventually it came to a point where the pastors were like, what do we do with this? Our congregation, even our high-paying congregation, is mad about what Bob and Ephraim speak for and what they do at Bayside Midtown. We may have to separate. They were actually the first ones to bring up separation, but it was because of the pressure. It was kind of political pressure.
What I believe you're talking about is that what you were preaching and some of the things you would say was in service to your congregation.
100%.
And
in my community.
That didn't necessarily fit what people in the suburb of Sacramento felt fit their congregation.
100%.
So like they didn't match.
100%. 100%.
So one, I attend, I'm gonna say that with quotes, Midtown.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
We haven't been there recently, but so as my pastor and somebody I also consider a friend,
absolutely.
I know you had challenges even within your own congregation, and I would just say, my opinion, because your congregation is so diverse, these challenges come. It's kind of like our country, the diversity of our country
100%.
causes some challenges that you're forced to deal with, or in some cases ignore, I guess.
100%.
So I know, like, for example, during George Floyd and Stephon Clark, really tumultuous times with tragic situations, very dividing situations. There was challenges within even your church, as, you know, even at times there was police officers that didn't agree necessarily.
100%.
So I guess two questions. Why do you continue to address those challenges? And how do you deal with challenges where you're preaching to a church where not everybody sitting is in agreement with each other?
Yeah. Because biblically in the book of Revelation, when it talks about what heaven's going to be like, it's every tribe, every nation, every tongue. So I think, you know, and it's kind of a standard line, but it's true. Eventually, anyone who is connected to God through Christ's work on the cross is going to live in this afterlife that the Bible calls paradise. And that's going to be a conservative in Alabama, and it's also going to be somebody in Nairobi who doesn't even know what liberal or conservative means. It's going to cover the gamut. And so, because I think we should look a little bit more like heaven before we get there. But B, you know, to me, the gospel is good news for everybody. It's not supposed to, the gospel isn't just Christ died on a cross for our sin. The gospel is Christ's kingdom has come in some way. While it hasn't ultimately come in the afterlife, it's come. And that, you know, the Matthew 25 kind of stuff where Jesus is saying, I'm gonna separate the sheep from the goat, and whatever you've done for the least of these, you've done for me. All that comes into play when you talk about the gospel. So, like, I want everybody to know the gospel. I want everybody to know that, yes, I believe Christ died on our cross for salvation, for sacrifice of our sin, but also that Christians aren't what they are, what some Christians, especially I would say Christian nationalists, are representing, because Christian nationalists are really this kind of subset that has the loudest voice, but I think makes Christianity look the worst. And I'm really, 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 really attempting to show people like that isn't what Christ called us to. Christ has called us to be together. But again, Chief, going back to what we said about Sacramento, just a lot of people are uncomfortable in that setting. You know, and worse than that, a lot of people hate that. But I'm not even trying to win them over. The people who we can win over, that's who I'm trying to incorporate in.
So, what do you think, in your mind, the way you co-pastor your church, what do you think the role is of the church outside of, say, Sunday services?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I ask that is I've asked you in my past life as police chief, I've asked you on multiple occasions to do some pretty challenging things because of your trust you have within the community and the fact that you're a church. One, you've had me come into the church and teach history and stuff, which isn't always a easy thing to listen to, and the church was packed. I think that's in large part due to your leadership that people are willing to come and sit in that uncomfortable environment and expand their experience.
I think it's yours as well, though. They knew it was you. Yep.
And I think the other thing, probably more important to me, or was more critical to me at the time, was, as you know, and anybody in Sacramento knows, we've had some pretty tragic officer-involved shootings that were very controversial and stood the possibility of tearing our city apart for long periods of time.
Yep.
And in one of those families, at some point, investigations are done and results need to be released. And I always believe that the family needs to hear that before it's on the news and all that. And you volunteered your church and your services to help with those meetings, which I imagine you've been in numerous meetings as a pastor that are not very comfortable. But those are some of the most uncomfortable meetings I've ever been into. But I also think some of the most worthwhile meetings, because you're dealing with people's loved one who's lost somebody at the hands of the police department. So I'm just curious your philosophy on what you believe the role of the church is outside of Sunday service.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm in this cohort with a bunch of church planners, and we were talking about that today. So just really quickly, like, church talks about, the Bible talks about mission a lot, and church is supposed to incorporate mission, but I think that word gets co-opted too. Mission, when you boil it down, mission is really just ministering to people and meeting the needs of people outside of your church. So you want to do that to the people inside your church, but being missional is doing that outside of the church. And so that's why, our three, I don't know, maybe central outreaches at our church have to do with the educational disparity that exists, help with assisting with the unhoused community, and I'm missing one right now, but you can't do church and not be missional. You're not even doing church if all you do is look inwardly. So that's a part of being a comforter and being a place of security and trust for your community, I think is important. And I think that's the only way the Church Universal is going to gain any traction. The Church Universal is in decline rapidly. And so I think that's because you can survey the community around them, and they'll tell you, yeah, we don't trust them. We think they're hypocrites. We think they look at themselves and look to fend for themselves, and they don't care about their communities at all. We have to overcome that, and we have to get out there and be the hands and feet of Jesus in our communities. And then the third thing I'd say is, just being honest with you, not because you're here, I tell everybody this, I would have done anything for you because you took so much heat. You were doing the right things, and you were attempting to change the department from the inside, but you got battered from the left and from the right. And so I just wanted to be at some level, some place of comfort for you as well. And then you and I used to sit around your desk and share war stories every couple of weeks. So
well, I'll tell you, and I know you know this experience yourself in different things you've done throughout your life, but you find out who your friends are. People's phone don't get picked up, or a lot of stuff doesn't happen when it's times of the biggest challenges, and you always picked up.
Oh, you're very kind.
So I just got a couple more questions.
Yep.
We're in a time, and we've been in this time for several years now, of deep division in our country, in Sacramento. there's rising crime. You don't have to turn on the TV too often to see groups of people going into like Nordstrom's and things and just taking what they want. Your church is kind of at the epicenter of the homeless crisis in Sacramento anyway, being downtown. What do you think the role of the church is in moving us as this program is called The Way Forward to a better tomorrow for all people? What do you think the role of the church, and I don't know, specifically Midtown, is in helping with this division and helping with this? It seems like anytime if you and I disagree, then instead of having this conversation about what we agree, we just start attacking each other personally.
Totally.
What do you think the role of the church is in moving us to a better tomorrow?
I think I'll go back to the first century church. The reason why, and this is historians talking, not biblical scholars, the reason why the first century church in Palestine exploded so quickly is because it was documented that the first century church was not only taking care of its own people, it was taking care of other people better than other people were taking care of their communities themselves. And so I think we have to go back to that. We have to desire, the churches in the Sacramento region have to desire to want the Sacramento region to become a better place for everybody. And we have to be, again, Jesus' hands and feet in our community, meeting needs where we can, being strategic where we need to be. And so that's where kind of some of the Matthew 25 stuff kicks in. Whatever you've done for the least of these, people aren't getting the same education. Let's step in and help somehow at some of the schools. If people aren't housed and they're unfed and they don't have clothes, let's help them somehow. Now, but I think it's two-pronged. You have to do that. You have to be Jesus' hands and feet. You also got to tell the truth. And so, the truth doesn't always lie on one political side or the other. And you and I have talked about that many times. It's like, even talk about the housing issue now, or the unhoused community. I have a tremendous amount of compassion for them. I also have a tremendous amount of compassion for our small business owners. And to be honest with you, in some of the areas in our neighborhoods right now, it's kind of dangerous. And so something has to be done. While we are helping clothe and feed some people who really need it, I want to be a part of conversations that say, okay, what are we going to do here? Because our people that are working and are housed are feeling unsafe many times. A lot of people don't want to hear that on both sides of the equation. Where there are educational disparities and where there has been systemic racism, you know better than anybody, a lot of people don't want to hear that on the right.
Right.
But it's the truth, and we got to continue to communicate it. And it doesn't matter, what we have to take for it. Like, I'll stand on the truth any day. I don't think I need to shoot myself in the foot on a daily basis, but I do want to stand on the truth.
Well, I can attest to that. You've done all of what you just said,
you're so kind.
And you repeatedly do it. You speak the truth, and you deal with the challenges that come from that, because anytime you are speaking like that in a very diverse congregation or community, not everybody has the same experiences. So, but that doesn't make you shy away. And I can still remember you telling me, I think it was during COVID, that if we came across any family or anybody that needed food, just call you and you deliver. And we did that several times.
You were great about that.
Within an hour or two, that family would have everything that they needed.
Thanks, brother.
So, you have lived exactly what you just said. Last question is, if somebody listening to this today wants to become part of this diverse community of Midtown, and by diverse, I don't mean just race or gender. I mean experiences wise.
Sure.
How would they go about joining this Midtown community, or what would you recommend that they do if they're looking for something like that that they could become a part of?
The first thing, obvious things, Chief, I'd say go to our website. It's midtownchurch.org. Our sermons are up there, so you can check out what we're talking about and preaching about. You can see some of our ministries and what we do in the community. And then just a shameless plug here. September 17, we're moving into our new space. So we've expanded our territory, and we purchased a few years ago the building right next to ours on 19th and W. We purchased the building right next to it, which used to be Sunfish, and we have completely renovated, and it's ready for occupancy. So we're gonna do our first set of Sunday services in there on September 17th. So anybody can come and join us and see what we're about. Yeah, and please, like, if anybody listening to Chief Hahn right now does show up because they listen to Chief's podcast, please come say hi to me. I don't want you to walk in and walk out and not say anything.
Hey, well, Pastor Bob, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate everything you've done, and continue to do, not only within the walls of the church,
thank you,
but in our community. I think the testament to what you do is reflected in the people that come to your church, the people that you know, the people that you surround yourself with. And I think it's truly a benefit to our community, and I'm sure it will continue to be. So
you're
thank
so
you
kind.
very much.
You have been the same, Chief. Always looked up to you, and you had the most difficult job in the entire region, and you handled it with skill. So I appreciate you. You're a model for me. Can I say one more thing,
Yes,
Chief?
absolutely.
Because this is something we'll definitely both agree on. Support your Sacramento Kings, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great group of guys. They finally made it to the playoffs last year, and I think they're going to improve on that. So I'm hoping the city really rallies around them again.
Absolutely. I can definitely agree with that.
There we
Support
go.
the Kings.
There you go.
Thank you, Pastor Bob.
Thank you, brother.
One of the
Appreciate
big purposes of A Way Forward is to hear different voices and different opinions, because that is how we can make informed decisions ourselves. So if you are someone that would like to come on A Way Forward to express your opinion, go to chiefhahn.com/podcast. Chief, HAHN.com/podcast.